Can we trust the Gospels? We live in an age where many people question the Bible's reliability. Some claim we can't trust the Gospels because they were written too late, were copied inaccurately, or were biased. But when we examine the historical evidence, we see something astonishing. The Gospels are some of the most well-attested ancient documents we possess. 1. The unparalleled evidence for Jesus. It's remarkable that we have 4 biographies of Jesus. Compare this with the Roman Emperor Tiberius, the most powerful man of Jesus' time. Only 4 ancient sources provide us with information about him. Yet Jesus, a man from an obscure village, has the same number of biographies, and they contain more words about him than 3 of the 4 sources on Tiberius do about him. Some might argue that since most sources about Jesus come from Christian writers, we should be skeptical. But consider this: most books about golf are written by golf enthusiasts. Does that mean their insights are automatically false? Likewise, those who wrote about Jesus were devoted to him, but that doesn't mean they weren't telling the truth. 2. Early and reliable manuscripts. How early are our sources? Even the world's leading Bible skeptic, Bart Ehrman, dates the Gospels to within 40 to 65 years of Jesus' life. Compare this with Alexander the Great. The earliest sources about him were written 250 to 450 years after his death. Yet no one doubts Alexander existed or that we can know things about him. Moreover, the Gospels come from within living memory of the events they describe. In the ancient world, people passed down history orally and with great precision. They were used to memorization in ways we aren't today. So, the claim that the Gospels were distorted over time, like the telephone game, doesn't hold up when we consider how history was preserved in ancient cultures. 3. The Gospels. Get the details right. If the Gospels were written by people who didn't know the land, time, or culture of Jesus, we would expect to find errors, but we don't. Instead, the Gospels contain details that could only come from people familiar with the time and place. Geography and travel. The Gospels consistently describe travel accurately. When someone goes to Jerusalem, the text always says they go up because Jerusalem is on a hill. When they leave, it says they go down. This is geographically correct and wouldn't be easy for an outsider to get right. Names. The Gospels also get names right. We now have data from ancient sources like burial inscriptions and historical texts showing the most common names for Jews in the 1st century. The names in the Gospels match these records perfectly. Later so-called Gospels, like the Gospel of Philip, get names wrong. One even assumes Nazareth was Jesus' last name. Botany and culture. When Luke tells us Zacchaeus climbed a sycamore tree in Jericho, that's a small but significant detail. Sycamore trees grow in Jericho's climate, but not in places like Jerusalem. If Luke were making things up, he wouldn't have known this. The same is true for the feeding of the 5,000. Mark and John mention that the grass was green. That wouldn't normally be true in Israel's dry climate, except during the time of Passover, when the spring rains make the grass green. Again, an accurate detail that supports eyewitness testimony. The Gospels reinforce each other without collusion. Skeptics argue that the Gospels contradict each other, but when we examine them, we find a pattern of subtle agreement that suggests authenticity rather than fabrication. Take the feeding of the 5,000. John tells us Jesus asked Philip where they could buy food. Why Philip? John's Gospel doesn't explain, but Luke tells us the event happened near Bethsaida. Earlier in John's Gospel, we learn Philip was from Bethsaida. That means Jesus was asking a local. This kind of undesigned coincidence shows that the Gospel writers weren't inventing details, but reporting real events from different perspectives. Star 5. The Gospels were recognized as scripture from the beginning. Some claim the church chose the Gospels centuries later, but that's not true. The Gospels were recognized as authoritative from the beginning. There was never a council that sat down and decided which books belonged. They were accepted because they stood far above all other writings. For example, later Gospels, like the Gospel of Thomas, start by claiming to contain secret knowledge. That's very different from the 4 Gospels, which present Jesus' teachings as public truth. The early church didn't suppress other Gospels. They simply weren't recognized as authentic because they came too late and contradicted known facts. 6. The message of the Gospels matters. The reliability of the Gospels is important because they don't just tell us about an interesting historical figure, they tell us about Jesus, who claimed to be the Son of God. The Gospels tell a remarkable story, one that echoes the whole Bible. The Bible begins with Adam and Eve taking from a tree and bringing death into the world. The Gospels climax with Jesus, the Son of God, giving his life on a tree to bring salvation. This isn't just a collection of interesting stories, it's the grand narrative of history. Conclusion: what will you do with Jesus? If the Gospels are true, and all the evidence suggests they are, then the most important question is not just whether we can trust them, but whether we will trust Jesus. Some of you here may already be Christians. I hope this strengthens your confidence in the Bible. But if you're not yet following Jesus, I urge you, examine the evidence, read the Gospels for yourself, and consider the claims of Jesus. Jesus didn't just teach good morals. He claimed to be the way, the truth, and the life. He died for you and rose again. Will you trust him? Thank you.